Hi, I'm Dr. Peterson with Regions EMS. It's July, which means the longest day of the year has already come and gone. We're spending a lot of time outdoors in these few short months of summer here in Minnesota and Wisconsin. This month, we're going to talk about electrocutions, back safety, and distracted driving. We have several special guests with us to help expand on some of these topics, and we're hosted by Lakeview EMS. So stay tuned, because coming up are the 3 things you need to know. Before we get into our topics this month, I want to talk about 2 operational things that you should be aware of. Imagine your last ride into the hospital with a critically injured patient. All the things you have to do and redo and then do over again. You may have noticed that MRCC has been a little bit more picky recently about asking questions when you call in a TTA. They're being directed by our trauma surgeons at Regions Hospital that we really need you to report a heart rate and a blood pressure and notify the hospital as soon as you can. If you haven't noticed, Regions Hospital has been extremely busy lately, and it can take some time to pull a patient out of a room and make space for another critical trauma patient coming in. The surgeons make decisions on operating room availability based on the vital signs that you report. So those are critical pieces of information to relay to the hospital. The other thing to talk about is documentation during cardiac arrest. We've been tracking CARES data for a number of years now, and we're looking at ways to improve survival from cardiac arrest. The easiest way to make a big change is to focus on the easiest changes, and one of those easy things would be to work on a bystander CPR initiative. Unfortunately, we're not sure how accurate the data is that we have right now. So next time you're on a cardiac arrest, make sure you take some time to go through the CARES data section and completely document everything to the best of your ability. We'd especially like to focus on the bystander CPR rates to see if that's an area that we can improve on. Being outside in the summer in the upper Midwest can be fun, but at times it can also be dangerous. Did you know that lightning strikes the United States about 25 million times per year? And that lightning can occur any time of the year, not just in summer. Every year, about 47 people are killed from lightning strikes, and hundreds more are severely injured. So what is lightning?
Can lightning strike the same place twice? Let's figure out what makes it happen in the first place. Lightning is electricity, and electricity involves tiny particles. Some particles have a positive charge, and some have a negative charge. The 2 opposite charges pull towards each other like the north and south ends of magnets. Usually, electric charges are fairly balanced, but the turbulent winds of a storm cause electric charges to separate within the cloud. Most lightning occurs within the cloud itself, but we're concerned about the lightning between clouds and the ground. Lightning starts with negative charges moving from the clouds towards the ground. Scientists call it a stepped leader. Meanwhile, an upward leader forms as positive charges move up from the ground, usually from tall objects. When a stepped leader and an upward leader meet, it makes a path for a much larger and brighter electric current to shoot up into the cloud. This is what we see in the sky as lightning. It happens so quickly that lightning seems to travel from the cloud to the ground, when in fact the opposite is true. So, can lightning strike the same place twice? Absolutely. For example, Toronto's CN Tower is struck by lightning around 75 times each year. In fact, in August 2011, the tower was shocked a record-breaking 52 times in 84 minutes. But don't worry. The tower was built to withstand it, so it's a safe place to be if lightning strikes once, twice, or even 52 times.
From 2006 to 2016, 352 people were killed by lightning strikes in the United States. We often think of golfers as being at risk for lightning strikes, but the reality is that fishermen were killed at nearly 3 times the rate of golfers by lightning, and camping and beach-related activities each accounted for more than twice as many deaths due to lightning as golf. Based on media reports from some of these strikes, most people were headed to safety at the time that they were struck by lightning. This means that we need to do more work around public education for seeking shelter before the risk becomes more severe. The first and most important part of treatment is that you keep yourself safe. A common myth is that people who have been struck by lightning carry a charge. This isn't true. They're perfectly safe to touch. Just make sure that you don't put yourself in a position where you could get struck by another bolt of lightning. The first priority will be to move the patient to a safe area and then begin treatment. In an MCI situation, victims of lightning strikes who are found in cardiac arrest are actually treated first and triaged as red patients. This is because over 90% of lightning strike victims survive. Patients might display all sorts of symptoms, including respiratory distress, respiratory arrest, cardiac arrhythmias, cardiac arrest, seizures, vertigo, dizziness, and all sorts of autonomic dysfunction, which means their vital signs will be unpredictable. You can reference our electrocution patient care guideline for more details, but the important thing is to make sure you get these patients to the closest level 1 trauma center as quickly as possible to be evaluated for burns and other internal injuries. Since we're talking about electrocutions, one thing that comes to mind is power line safety. So we reached out to Xcel Energy, and we're fortunate to have Erica Fink with us from Xcel to talk about power line safety and some of the things that you might not know about power lines. So Erica, thanks for being with us.
You bet.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do for Xcel?
Well, Dr. Peterson, I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you. I'm a public safety coordinator. There's 2 of us in the company. I cover the North States, so where it's cold. Where it's cold, we have a lot of storms. And when ice gets on our lines, they can come down pretty easily. So we want to make sure that the public is aware. When an electric line is on the ground, it's extremely dangerous. We put them up high because we don't want you to touch them. Therefore, when they come down on the ground, we still don't want you to touch them. So just keep that in mind, and keep in mind a radius to stay away from it.
So how much power does it actually take to harm someone?
Very little. Half a volt crossing your heart can kill you. I just explained that there's 240 volts to your home, so more than enough to kill you. And the old adage that there is low voltage on the power lines, that is gone. We live in an age of fiber optic cable, so if you actually hit a phone or a cable line, which are the lowest on the pole, they're deadly. And so the notion that you can be safe around it because it's low voltage is just, it's hogwash. It's dangerous.
So one of the things that we would think about in EMS is a car accident where a vehicle takes out a power pole, power lines are down either on or around the car. What advice would you have for our first responders when they see lines down around a car accident?
But you want to remember, that line can jump the length of itself. If it's a 20-foot line segment that's down, that's 20 feet in all directions. You've got to secure a nice perimeter. Don't let people rush towards you, and they will because adrenaline kicks in and they don't understand how dangerous it is. Once we get there and secure the power, then we'll let you know it's safe. And if you absolutely have to get out of your car, and you want to make sure you don't touch the car and the ground at the same time. So you'll cross your chest, hop from your car, and keep your feet together, either hopping or shuffling. So Dr. Peterson, if you think about it, when you were a kid and you threw a rock out on a lake, you had those rings, those concentric rings of energy dissipating. That is exactly what electricity will do. Where the car and the wires are touching, there's a lot of voltage. And then as I move a little bit away, there's less voltage, and so on and so on. If I put my feet in 2 different rings of voltage, I'm going to complete the path to the ground and I'm going to get shocked. It's called step potential. It's the difference between each step. So you want to keep your feet together so that you don't incur that shock.
So this sounds pretty dangerous, and yet we see people every day up on buckets, working on power lines and power poles. How do they do it? What safety equipment do your workers use?
Well, firstly, our linemen have extensive training, 4 years minimum for them to touch the wires. We always have a spotter. If we lift a bucket truck up toward the poles, we're very mindful of 10-foot radius around that. Our buckets are insulated, our workers are insulated, and they're incredibly well trained.
So on a typical power line like we have behind us here, what's the voltage traveling through those lines up there?
So the highest voltage is always on top, how we design our system. So you've got anywhere between 13 and 14,000 volts on the top, it's primary. You drop down secondary, and then you come down again to the cable or phone, and those are considered lower voltage, but remember, It only takes half a volt to cross your heart to kill you. So the 12 and 24 volts of cable, that's really deadly. So they're all dangerous.
Well, Erica, thank you for spending time with us today and sharing your
Pleasure.
knowledge and experience with Excel Energy. Hopefully this is very helpful to some of our first responders and public safety professionals next time you encounter an electrical situation at work. So for those of us who have been in public safety for any length of time, it's almost inevitable that you're going to respond to a bad car accident from time to time. Unfortunately, a high percentage of those accidents are caused by distracted drivers. We have Sheriff Dan Starry from Washington County Sheriff's Department with us today to talk about some of the work that's being done to try to identify and prevent distracted driving accidents within the county. So Sheriff Starry, tell us a little bit about what your department is doing right now.
Absolutely. Right now we're doing a concentrated effort on Highway 36, actually running from the new bridge in Stillwater, crossing the St. Croix, all the way into Roseville. So it's a long stretch, but we're partnering with our law enforcement agencies. We have the State Patrol, other local law enforcement, and we're really hitting distracted driving because we know across the nation, across Washington County and Minnesota, distracted driving is killing and it's hurting our citizens at an alarming rate.
How successful has this sting been so far?
This sting has actually been really successful. We're getting the education piece out there, which is really important. But through social media and then just our enforcement efforts, we're hearing from a lot of the citizens that it is making a difference. They're seeing the squad cars out there, they're slowing down, but more importantly, they're getting off their cell phones, which is one of the major reasons we're out there, is because that's what we're seeing with distracted driving.
So if you're driving down the highway and you see somebody on their cell phone or someone who appears to be distracted, what can the average citizen do to try to address that situation?
You know, what I would say is, for the most part, contact law enforcement. We're out there 24/7, 365 days a year, especially those ones that are very egregious, crossing the center lines, the fog lines, all over the road. It's just no different than driving while impaired. We've seen a fatal accident here recently in April of this year, and we know that that person was driving while distracted. And so it's those types of incidents that we have to stop.
And these are absolutely preventable, and that's what's so heartbreaking and frustrating about it.
You are absolutely correct. You know, I don't call them accidents anymore because they're not an accident. They are truly a crash. These are preventable, and they are hurting our loved ones, they're hurting our citizens, and they're killing those that we love.
So from an EMS standpoint, you know, there's a lot of times where our agencies, our providers are giving tours of an ambulance, they're at community events showing off their fire trucks, their vehicles, things that they do to keep the community safe. What can we do to educate the public during these events about distracted driving?
I think you just hit it. I think educating the public, getting out to these events and getting out to our schools, getting out to any civic type of opportunities, community engagement events that we can say, hey, this is what's going on. 1 in 4 traffic crashes involve some type of distracted driving. It's killing over 70 of our people a year. Over 350 injuries, serious injuries that we respond to. And I think the more education that we can get to the kids coming up and through, especially at driver's education, or even, like I said, community events such as parades and these community festivities that we have, the public-private partnerships, we can all collaborate, get the message out that this is truly an epidemic that we're seeing at an alarming rate.
Well, unfortunately, we have to talk about this. And so thank you for being willing to share what your department is doing in Washington County. Sheriff, we appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
So we're here today with Jeff Carlson from NovaCare Rehabilitation. Jeff has done a lot of work with local public safety agencies to talk about a functional approach to injury prevention for the back. So Jeff, tell us a little about yourself and how you got involved in back safety.
Sure. So I'm an athletic trainer and exercise physiologist. I started out in Philadelphia. Our clinic took care of the 76ers, so I got to learn a lot about functional approach to reducing injuries in athletes. So we take that information now and transfer it to the industrial athlete, where we see a lot of injuries happen because of worker habits.
So how did you get involved with EMS and fire specifically?
I got tired of working with paramedics and firefighters after they were injured, so I actually went through firefighter training and EMS training to get an idea of where the training may have gaps, where we can teach individuals how to be safer.
What types of injuries do you see most commonly amongst fire and EMS professionals?
A lot in the way of low back injuries and shoulder upper extremity injuries, and according to Department of Labor stats, 80% of those injuries happen because of worker habits. People set themselves up without even realizing it.
So Jeff, what are some basic things we can do during our day-to-day activities to keep our backs healthy and prevent injury?
Sure. Most people wait to talk about back safety in certain lifting techniques, but it's the things you do during the day that really set you up. How you sit during the day, the amount of rest that you had, exercises that you do to make sure the proper muscles are firing.
So what's the research behind the techniques that you use to reduce back stress?
Sure. A researcher by the name of Nachemson in 1969 did a study where they took a needle, put in the disc of a group of people's backs, and had them move around. They found that when you stand, you put 100 pounds of pressure at the L4-5 disc, which is the disc most often injured. We know that when you sit with perfect posture, the pressure is 140 pounds, so 40% more stress. But if the tendency is to sit in your vehicle in a slouched position, it's actually 185 pounds of force in your low back. If a person gets out of the ambulance and notices they walk in a forward bend, that's a warning sign. We know that when you bend forward to touch your toes, it's 150 pounds of stress on your back. So you actually have 35 pounds more stress in your back sitting slouched than you do bending and touching your toes. But where people really get into trouble is when they bend forward with a twist. When you bend forward with a twist, it's 400 pounds of force on your disc at knee level and up to 600 pounds of force on the disc at ankle level. So we know that has a negative effect.
So when we think about lifting, safe back health, a lot of it we think about lifting. That's where our brains go is how can we lift safely to prevent a back injury. But what you're saying is that it's much more than that it starts before the lift, it continues after the lift. The lift may not even be the thing that is the actual cause of injury.
So many times it's not necessarily the weight of the lift, it's the posture a person's using. That can be 10 times more the cause of an injury than just strict weight. When we take a look at how paramedics are sitting, oftentimes we see their posture may be what's setting them up. The tendency is for them often to be in a position here to get more foot support. However, that takes their thigh off of the chair. In this position with Mark, we see that the femur really isn't in contact. We only have half the femur giving his back support. So we can have up to 45 pounds more stress on the low back. I'm going to have Mark bring his chair forward 2 clicks. And what we're going to see now, he brings his foot up to the foot pad. We now see that his femur is fully supported with not more than 3 fingers of space between the seat pan and the calf. That takes 45 pounds of stress away from his back. Now we take a look at his hand position here. What we want to see is that the shoulder blade is back in the chair and we don't have any stress to the upper trapezius. In this position, he can take up to 20 pounds of stress off of his neck. This is the best position to help you make sure you're not setting yourself up for back issues when it comes time to lift. In this position, you're much more fatigue resistant and can take the load of the day.
Well, Jeff, that was excellent information. Thank you so much for spending time with us today and sharing your wisdom. It's like you've done this once or twice before. So appreciate your time.
Thank you for the opportunity. It was great to work with you.
Special thanks to our guests this month for helping us out. Sheriff Dan Starry from Washington County, Erica Fink from Excel Energy, and Jeff Carlson from NovaCare Rehabilitation. Also thanks to our Lakeview colleagues for being gracious hosts. Hopefully something you heard this month will be educational and help you on a future EMS call. Enjoy the warm weather while it lasts as we get ready for August and the State Fair coming up. I'm Dr. Peterson for Regions EMS. Be smart, be safe, and be professional. We'll see you next month.